everyone. Welcome back to another Sips with Purple Cork from the vineyards. We're out at Skipstone today. Super excited to be sitting down with Andrea, one of our favorite marketers and fellow wine lovers. So Andrea, what's in that glass of yours?
This is an Aperture 2019 Cabernet Sauvignon. It's red, which is my favorite kind of wine. And also, pro tip, if you are a marketer listening to this and you want to get a bunch of people to your event, I always use the Michael Scott from The Office quote of, he has this episode where he is like tasting wine and he says, smells red.
Smells like wine?
No, smells red.
Smells
so
red.
that is the number one subject line for our invites to all of our events is smells like red, Michael Scott. And like people love it. It drives tons of
wonder your attendance is so high.
That's right. And also, like, look at that. It's like 1 minute in and the value has already started.
I know. Welcome to Sips with Purple Cork, everyone.
Right. You get it only here.
And here,
that's what I'm drinking.
We have some Oliver's Blend 2018.
Nice.
Looks
and
like
that's
a Magnum.
Skipstone, which is where we originally met.
That's right. On the 6 Sense virtual conference, December 2020.
Yeah, it's like returning to the place where we had our first date or something.
I know.
And now we have a grand love affair.
Thought it was appropriate. Well, yeah. So let's dive in. I mean, you've been doing virtual events since even before December 2020. So where did this strategy come from, bringing together people online for these networking events?
Yeah, so we have been using this strategy for a long time. So we were one of those businesses that was very, very well positioned when the pandemic happened, due to the fact that we are a consulting firm and we have always had at least half, if not more than that, of our workforce remote. So just due to the nature of the work that we do, I can't find enough people in Phoenix to do it. So I've always had to work remotely. And then I've always had to find ways to get those people engaged. And so we had a lot of like fortunate experience already in trying to engage with our remote workforce. And so we really just used like a lot of those same strategies and techniques when we needed to engage our prospects all remotely. So I think, we were really well positioned to kind of do that and pivot really, really quickly. I also we had a super small team. So that's also the nice thing in a lot of ways, that like, we didn't have all of these field events already scheduled when the pandemic hit that we had to like convert into these other approaches. We were already doing things virtually as a first step, and then sometimes doing things physically, just due to the nature of like, I was a 1-person team and I didn't have the capacity to schedule a bunch of things in Boston and Philadelphia and Miami and Chicago. I wouldn't have been able to do it anyways. So the easier thing to do was always to have a remote experience that I could invite people from all of those cities to, and I only had to coordinate one thing. So like a lot of this is just laziness, right? Like I think laziness is the birth of innovation.
Well, it's like the pro and con of having such a small team, right? Like you can move fast and test and pivot if you need to, but you might not have the resources you'd get with the bigger company or a bigger team.
Yeah. And so then the other big thing that's a part of my particular approach to marketing is I do a ton of partner marketing, because that basically doubles your team that's going to help you on something and doubles your budget. And so that was the other big thing that we did, is that as our partners who were much more into field events because they have much larger teams, our partners, when I say that, are all technology companies. So Adobe, Salesforce, Telium, 6 Sense. So they all had much bigger teams that were planning these field events, and they had much less experience putting on a virtual event. And so we were able to come in and say like, oh, well, just give us half of what it's going to cost to do this event. And you can like help us with the landing page and all of those sorts of things. So it kind of worked out really perfectly that way too, that they were all looking to spend budget on these things that they didn't really have expertise on how to execute. So that's really how it started, is just through partner marketing and the like stuff that we were already doing and being able to just do more of it.
I love it. Well, speaking of budget, what's in your 2022 events budget?
So we are, I do think it's interesting when you talk to marketers because there are a lot of data-driven marketers who have been shit talking trade shows and summits and any of those big events.
There's no swearing on Sips.
Oh,
totally kidding.
Well, you have the wrong fucking guest. So there's a lot of people who have been, just really down on spending that amount for events. But the crazy thing is that if you ask people how they have heard about you, the number of times that I hear in my business, oh, like I saw you at Marketo Summit in like 2012, in 2014, they've never worked with us. I would never be able to do that. Like they've changed jobs 4 different times, right? Like unless I ask them how that happened, it's not going to work. And also live events do have a return on investment. It just takes a lot longer. So my particular strategy is still mostly virtual. I still have a really small, scrappy team, but I do think what we've done is a 20-80 model. So we are doing 20% of my events budget is going to like those large shows. And then 80% of it is still in these sort of more scrappy events. And for the most part, we're using stuff like Purple Cork mid funnel, right? So like, it's not ever like totally cold prospecting event for us. It's always that somebody has done something to engage with us, and that doesn't have to be a lot of engagement, right? Like in our business, trust takes a really long time to develop with marketers when it comes to consultation services. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be that they took a meeting, and we don't do demos. So it's not that, but even if they, attend a webinar or even register for a couple of webinars, we'll invite you to one of these events. People are like, oh, I'll like sign up so I can get my free wine. But we'll get you eventually.
Everyone gets Aperture or Skipstone.
But yeah, I mean, that's sort of the approach, right? Is like, we're still doing a ton of these events, and they're not always wine events, right? Like we really, again, like due to the nature of our business, and we do a ton of team building events too, where by the way, we also use Purple Cork, but we'll do like magicians, and we'll do all sorts of stuff to just mix it up. And yeah, so it's still mainly remote stuff, and webinars we still do, like all of those kinds of events we're still hosting remotely. And then we are starting to mix in some of the live in-person events. Also, just from my personal strategy around marketing is like, be wherever other people aren't, right? So like to some extent that some people are still not going back to live events gives you a little bit of a competitive advantage. So that's what I'm trying to exploit.
Well, and we have to get creative, right? I love that you're thinking about magicians, and it's okay. You don't have to only do Purple Cork wine tastings, but that seems to be a trend for this year. Just, we've been on a lot of Zoom. So how do we together kind of keep it fresh, keep it fun, and just continue to set the bar? Is your glass already gone?
No, it just looks like it because I'm wearing black.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Blends in. So I know you have been passionate about community-led growth. So in tech, SaaS, we hear so much about product-led growth. Would love to hear more about the community, sort of how you think about it with respect to these events.
Yeah, I am super passionate about community. I think I've seen a couple of really phenomenal examples of it. And basically, I'm really competitive, right? So like anytime that I see someone else, yes, I know. Anytime I see someone else doing something that's just really great, and I can tell that it's helping build their business, I'm like, shit, I want to be doing that, right? So I'm part of a CMO group that Matt Heinz and Latney from Sixth Sense, their CMO, put on, and they started that right at the beginning of the pandemic. It's basically every Friday we meet together as a group. There's a West Coast time slot basically and an East Coast time slot. And so there's over 100 marketers, sometimes almost 200, maybe there's even been over 200 on these Friday calls. And there are some of us that join almost every Friday. It's like it really is the most powerful network I have ever had the pleasure of being a part of. And the fact that they have created this community, I know people who have done business with both of them that without that community, I think they'd be really hard pressed to say that they would have found Sixth Sense or Heinz Marketing and like contracted with them to do work. So I think it absolutely works. I think when you look at the community that Marketo built over the past decade, right, with their Champions program, with their Fearless 40 or 50 or however many people they submit into that class every year. Like those things work. They evangelize people on your product, and they also grow the discipline that you are supporting. So in the case of Marketo, the discipline of marketing operations or marketing automation or whatever title you want to say there. I mean, that's how people, and I think the thing that I'm the most passionate about is that I have seen this change people's lives, right? Like I have seen people be able to afford their first home. I have seen them be able to afford more kids than they ever thought they'd be able to get, right? Because they now can afford college for all of them. Like those sorts of things that these technology companies are doing to grow their own business also really does help human beings. I think so many young people that I hear are looking for purpose-driven organizations, but they often say like, that means I need to work for a nonprofit, right? Like not really, right? Like if you worked for Marketo in 2018, like you were building a whole discipline that people would eventually grow in the skill set to get really, really high paying jobs that are very well respected with great benefits that change their lives, right? Like that is a mission that I can get behind. So that's why I'm so passionate about creating a community. And I think it's good for the business. I think it's good for culture. I think it's good for professionals. I think it's good for people learning and growing. And I'm super passionate about education. So I think that this is kind of the tie-in from education into community, is that by educating a group of humans and giving them themselves even to learn from, right? That's part of what's super powerful about any great community, is sort of all of your members end up becoming the content and the reason to come to the community. And so I know I've talked to you about this too, like, you know, everybody who's putting on these events, like you create great experiences for us to come together and learn from each other, and little homes in which we can do that. I think those things are great. Like they add so much to everyone's life. And I think, you know, community-led growth can sometimes come off a little corporate, but I have a very like Pollyanna view of it, I guess I would say, in the way that, you know, I think it really does help bring people together from, you know, there's obviously a lot of conversation about DEIB and inclusion and belonging in business today. And I think that these little communities are how we can do that and grow. And I think that companies that are doing that are just the kinds of places that I want to work.